Thank you. Good evening. Hey, look, I gave you 4 minutes to talk extra. I gave 4 extra minutes to talk. It's my turn. Thank you. Hey. Welcome to our midweek Bible study here at Azalea City Church of Christ. Got a few announcements and I've got a few prayer requests and a bunch of announcements. Before we begin, remember our order for our fall series is we're going to go through announcements, and then we're going to be led in one song, and then we'll be led in a closing prayer, and then I'll come up, we'll dismiss the teens, and then I'll come up and introduce our speaker for tonight. Please remember Brooklyn Buford Wally. So we mentioned her Sunday that she had already been to the hospital and was going to be induced. She was admitted because of high blood pressure. Labor was induced, and they did have their baby, and mom and baby are doing great. And I have the stats. I'd have to go back and look in my text, so I apologize. I don't have them in front of me, but they are both doing great. So y'all continue to remember Brooklyn, continue to remember her baby in your prayers. Sister Angie Maccini has another surgery scheduled for her foot. It's going to be October the 6th at Ochsner's, so please keep Sister Angie in your prayers. Sister Myra Blizzard, I know she had back surgery scheduled for October the 6th, but I have a note here that surgery may have been postponed to October the 15th. So y'all please keep Sister Myra in your prayers, whether it's the 6th or the 15th for her back surgery. And then just a little bit of prayer of thanksgiving, but Sister Belinda Russo is able to be with us tonight. So we're, Sister Belinda, very thankful and happy to see you. She went through a chemo treatment yesterday, and the doctor told her that she was healthy enough to go to church, so here she is. Maybe fist bumps only tonight for Sister Belinda. And then hopefully she's planning to stay healthy and hopefully be back on Sunday. And then her next chemo treatment, as long as she stays healthy, is planned for October the 21st. And then that's only, is that the last one? That'd be the last treatment. So great job, sister. Keep going, okay? Proud of you. Y'all keep Sister Belinda in your prayers. Ladies Bible study, Digging Deep, scheduled for October the 2nd, so tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. If you need any more information on that, you can see Christina Blankenship. The Ladies Fellowship Breakfast is scheduled for this coming Saturday. That'll be at 9 a.m. at Golden Corral. You can let Clarice Kite know if you plan to attend. Remember, Saturday is also our Walk for Water. We're going to start here at the building, registration at 8:30, right under the rainport. On the south side here, the walk will begin at 9. I have a QR code, and I forgot to put it on the screen. So, hey, you know what? I'll put it on Facebook. We'll put the link on Facebook for you guys to sign up to walk if you would like to. That way you'll be able to get a T-shirt. It's free to sign up. They want you to come and walk, but most importantly, what do they want? They want your money, because that's what helps dig wells and help villages out to get clean water. My goal, it's a personal goal, I hope we can attain this, is 2 wells. So that's $15,000 if we can do that. I think that's amazing. We skipped it last year because of all the flooding and damage that was done in like the Carolinas and Tennessee area. We had sent a lot of relief money and efforts up that way. So we postponed Walk for Water last year. So here we are back to our kind of the normal time to do that. Looks like it's going to be great weather on Saturday. Would love for you. It's a great time of fellowship for us to come together and to walk a few laps around our campus here and spend, an hour or two together. Walk, I think it's about 4 miles, 35 minutes if it's Tad. I mean, who's counting? But I'm just kidding. Appreciate Brother Tad for sure. He is definitely the pace setter. He's the pace car on Saturday. So looking forward to seeing everybody. Just hope you're able to come and support this great ministry. Discipleship group number 1 will meet this coming Sunday. A couple of calendar changes. Leaders of Light, potluck lunch, and youth-led service is scheduled for October the 12th. There will be a lunch following the morning worship service, and then the youth-led service will be after that. Certainly everyone is invited to attend, to stay for lunch, and then support our young people. Discipleship groups number 2 and 3 will meet October the 19th. Food distribution is tomorrow. That'll be over in the multipurpose building beginning around 8:30. It'll begin at 9, but if you can help out and would like to show up around 8:30 or a little before, that would be greatly appreciated. And then we mentioned this past Sunday that we were going to have a work day up here one Sunday afternoon. We had that planned for October the 12th, but we're going to adjust since that is going to be the youth-led worship. We'll push that to November the 2nd. Okay, so still, Brother Dale asked any guys at pressure washers and some water hoses to go along with that, but also any kind of power tools that we can kind of clean up around the buildings around here. So again, that will be November the 2nd. Tonight, our song leader is Joseph McDonald. After his song, Brother Bill Pierce will close us in prayer. We'll dismiss to Bible classes, and then I'll introduce our speaker for tonight.
There is beyond the azure blue a God concealed from human sight. He tinted his skies with heavenly hue and framed the worlds with his great might. There is a God, he is alive, in him we live and we survive. From dust our God created man, he is our God, the great I am. Our God who sat upon a tree, a life was willing there to give, that he from sin might set man free, and evermore with him could live. There is a God, he is alive, in him we live and we survive. From dust our God created man, he is our God, the great I am.
Father, we thank you so much for this time that we're able to come together in fellowship, do things, Father, to glorify your name. Be with all those on our prayer list, especially the ones mentioned tonight, Father. But you know the list is so long. Thank you so much for those that are doing better, those that are getting well. We just ask your blessings on each and every one of them, and to help us all, Father, to feel your presence in our lives, the calmness that comes to that. Thank you for your Son, Jesus, the price he paid for us. In his precious name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Oh, while the teens are leaving, I forgot this was handed to me. Not many people in here this would fit their wrist, but this was a bracelet found in the parking lot, so maybe somebody's got a small child. Mario, it's yours? Oh, my bad. All right, I'll have it with me. I'm not wearing it, but I'll have it with me. So tonight, our speaker comes to us from University Church of Christ, Jeremy Sigel. Jeremy's preached at the University Church since 2015. He is married to Miss Brittany. They have 3 children. One of them's here with us tonight, Leighton. Y'all may have seen him a few minutes ago. But Riley, Jackson, and Leighton. Before moving to Mobile, he served as the preaching minister for the Tarzan Church of Christ in Tarzan, Texas. I'm not reading his last statement because he's a liar, and I don't want to bring a liar up here before you. But I've had the privilege of knowing Jeremy since he moved here. We moved back to Mobile at the end of 2014, and then Jeremy and Brittany moved here shortly after that. So I've known Jeremy since then. been privileged to work with him out at Gulf Coast Bible Camp. He's helped. Him and I have directed Junior Week together for a few years now, along with Casey Bearden. And Jeremy is one of the greatest people that I know. And I mean that because in some tough conversations that him and I have had with adults in the past, he is super calm. And he's very, he's got a ton of wisdom, and I appreciate that about him. He also has a really big heart for people. So he's one of the kindest people that you'll meet. He's not going to talk bad about anybody. He is going to compete with me on who gets most steps during a week of Bible camp. So we do have some pretty heated conversations. I think we had some conversations about what a pickup truck is and what just a, what do you call them? You call them a pickup. We just call them trucks around here, okay? But he is from Texas, so y'all don't hold that against him. He has also been near about a professional bull rider, played linebacker in high school. He wrestled as well, so he helps with Mobile Christian's wrestling team. And Brittany, along with Jeremy, do a lot of work out at Mobile Christian and spend a lot of time there. So Jeremy's great. He's got a great lesson prepared, Wrestling with Your Faith. Looking forward to hearing Jeremy tonight, so y'all give him your attention over the next 30 or 40 minutes.
Good evening. I got to clarify a couple of things after that introduction. One, I'm going to read the rest of the bio that I sent Justin to read. So this is talking about me. It says his greatest accomplishment is getting to work as assistant to the amazing Gulf Coast Bible Camp director, Justin Barnes. So Justin's just too humble to read that bio. So, but it is true. I've really enjoyed getting to work alongside Justin and also Casey Bearden in that capacity, getting to know them. I will say, Justin said we compete for steps. It's not a competition. He blows me out of the water on that competition every day of how many steps we get at camp. But my steps are shorter, so I think I might get more rotations, but he definitely walks further. This morning Taylor texted me and he said, he asked me if I was using PowerPoint tonight, and I said I wasn't going to, and he said, are you going to bring a painting for an illustration? Because he knows I like to paint and I teach art and that kind of thing. And I just wrote back a wrestling demonstration. But I'm going to forego that demonstration since Taylor left, and he was going to be my partner to give that demonstration. But tonight we're talking about a text that I used to use growing up. My favorite sport as a kid, I played a lot of sports. I tried a lot of sports. My mind was always a lot more athletic than my body, but my favorite sport growing up was wrestling. I started when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I used to, whenever I was asked what was my favorite sport, I would use the text that we're going to go through tonight to justify why wrestling is the greatest sport of all time. It's the oldest sport. It goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 32. But it's also a sport that God participated in, as we'll see tonight. And so we're going to turn over to Genesis chapter 32, the text that was assigned to me. And I really appreciate the opportunity tonight. I also appreciate the way that you have designed this fall series. It's really cool. I've never seen a congregation do something where they kind of pick topics that are specific or unique to the speakers. And I was nervous when they told me that's how you guys were doing it. Nervous to see what some of you saw as my strengths. You've never seen me wrestle, but you picked that. So tonight we're looking at this idea, the story, Genesis chapter 32. Really, we see the text starting in verse 24. And it's kind of an interesting situation that takes place. A situation that leaves me with a lot of questions is why did this event take place? And we can draw a lot because we know the event that Jacob comes to this point where he is really he's worried about, not just worried, he's afraid for his life, because he knows that now Esau, his brother, who he tricked and did all this kind of stuff to, now wants to meet up with him. And he is afraid for his life. And so he's trying to, as kind of had become custom of Jacob, is Jacob had done a lot of things in his life where his goal was to receive a blessing from somebody. And that's why, with the help of his mom, that's why he tricked his father into giving him his brother's blessing. And in that, then later, as we see, as he goes to another country, goes to another place, with Laban, he kind of is working to get some things that he wants, a blessing from Laban with the marriage of his daughter. And we know how that kind of goes. He kind of turns it on him as well. Now he's also he's going to be confronted by Esau, and he's afraid, so he's trying to work out, how can I get out of this situation? And he goes there, he's at this place, and he is working a scheme, so to speak, of how can I get out of this? And he decides he's going to divide everything up, and the best that he can hope for is maybe not everybody is affected or impacted by what Esau is trying to do. And in this, he stops and he prays to God, which we think that's awesome, and that is awesome, that he stops to pray to God. But we're going to talk about that prayer a little bit later. But then something weird happens. Verse 24, let's read 24 through 32. It says, "Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him," talking about the man, "when he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh, so the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, 'Let me go, for the dawn is breaking.' But he said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' So he said to him, 'What is your name?' And he said, 'Jacob.' He said, 'Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed.' Then Jacob asked him and said, 'Please tell me your name.' But he said, 'Why is that you ask my name?' And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, 'I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved.' Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. Therefore to this day the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of Jacob's thigh in the sinew of the hip." Very strange event that takes place here. And tonight as you have assigned me with this topic, to relate this event to our wrestling with faith. And so I want to look at a couple of things tonight. I want to draw some, not necessarily parallels, because I think there's some major differences between this event and necessarily our struggle or our wrestling with faith. But there are a lot of principles that we see within this event and within Jacob and what takes place here that is true of our struggle or wrestling with faith. So let's make some of these, draw out some of these principles, and then hopefully, that's always the hope with the sermon, is that it will all tie back together and flow the way we hope that it will. First principle, and this one university knows they have to kind of get in my brain, and that can be kind of tough to do sometimes. So I hope you can get there with me. But the first principle I want to see is responsibility. Responsibility in our faith. In Genesis chapter 32, verse 24, I want us to notice something. Read 24 again. It says, "Then Jacob was left alone." And as we look at this struggle, as we look at this wrestling match that takes place, I want us to notice, and this is something I loved about wrestling. One of the things I loved, and let me say I also hated about wrestling. Wrestling, the sport of wrestling is an individual sport. I loved that because it meant it was just you and whoever you were facing. And so there wasn't, you didn't have anybody else that could mess you up. You didn't have anybody else that could get in the way, or there wasn't a lot of politics, which sometimes happens in sports. You won, you got to wrestle. So I liked that aspect of it. But I also hated the aspect of it that there weren't other people. There weren't people that, and here's a lot of times what that is if I made a mistake, you had to own it. It had to be yours. There was responsibility for everything that you did. You were kind of, just by default, held accountable for everything you did within a match. And as I look at this event tonight, as Jacob, he comes to this place, and I think it's important that it says he was left alone, because he's made this plan. Everybody's he's kind of put everybody in their place, and now he's left alone. And then all of a sudden, and I don't know how this took place, but all of a sudden there's a man, and this is just because if I was left alone somewhere and a man just started wrestling with me, that would be, it's kind of a strange situation that takes place. But Jacob also knew, and I think he perceived that there were some people, even though he might not have known who this was, there were some people that might have something to try to prove with him, or some reason to go after him for something. But Jacob, we see that he was strong. I mean, he was strong in that we see already before, even in his prayer to God. He talks about, when I went across the Jordan, he said, I went with just a staff. That shows, and in that prayer, we'll talk about that in a minute, but in that prayer, he's showing, I've been able to do some things of great strength. And so now, as this man starts to fight with him or to wrestle with him, he doesn't back down, does he? But there's something I want us to point out about him being alone, and as it connects to our wrestling with faith. Here's a point I want us to see, is that faith has to be our own. Our faith has to be our own. I make this point often with young people. I don't like that the teenagers aren't necessarily here to hear this, because I think teenagers need to hear this. Is there comes a point when it comes to your faith, when it comes to your belief in God, when it comes to your trust in God, all those things, when it comes to your relationship with God, it has to be yours. Can't be your parents. It can't be your spouses. It can't be your friends. It can't be the preachers. It can't be the youth ministers. It has to be your faith. And the reason that is so, the reason that is true, is because of verses like Romans 14:12. Romans 14:12 says, so then each one of us will give an account of himself to God. 2 Corinthians 5:10 also emphasizes this, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body, according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Now, I know one of the benefits we have in our faith, and we can't really, a lot of times we cannot separate or cannot have faith without other people in our life, because that's one of the designs that God gave of spreading the gospel and in developing faith within people, is we have to hear it, right? Romans tells us that how can they believe if they have not heard? And how can they hear if there's not somebody preaching to? It takes people. And we also know that in our walk of faith, in our journey of faith with God, that we have the benefit of being together, having a family, having encouragement from our brothers and sisters. Hebrews chapter 11 talks about that cloud of witnesses. Galatians 6:1 talks about bearing one another's burdens. And so it's kind of like wrestling. Wrestling was a team sport in that sense. We had encouragement. We had to wrestle with our teammates to help strengthen us and to encourage. But here's the thing. When you got out on the mat, it was you. And here's the thing with our faith. is when it comes to our relationship with God, when it comes to when we appear before the judgment, nobody's going to be there with us. We're held accountable. And I think that's something important that we have to remember. That's not to scare us. That's to help us to understand how important it is for us to develop a faith that is our own in God. Second thing I want to look at, and we'll come back and tie this all together. Second principle I want to see or bring out in Genesis chapter 32, Jacob wrestling with God. And this one's pretty obvious as we look at, well, what did it take for Jacob to prevail in that wrestling match? What did it take for him to prevail? I think, one, it took that responsibility, but even more so, we see it takes perseverance, doesn't it? Perseverance. And as we think about struggling, as we think about wrestling with our faith, as we think about even just our journey as Christians, the Hebrew writer, what does he compare it to? He compares it to a distance race, doesn't he? And what's the difference? What's the difference between a distance race and a sprint? It takes endurance. It takes endurance, and that's one of the things. As I know why you asked me to speak on this topic with my experience with wrestling, so I want to bring some of that in. You can argue with me, but I think the toughest sport is wrestling. If you have never wrestled a 6-minute match against somebody your same size, you don't know. These kids that we have coming on the team never wrestled before. They don't understand until that first match. And usually their first match doesn't last the full 6 minutes. Some of them last about 30 seconds, and they say, that was the toughest thing I've ever done. It takes endurance. And it takes being able to push through, and not only to push through from a breathing standpoint, but to push through pain. Because when you got somebody of your same equal strength or even stronger maybe that's grabbing you and trying to hold you down and trying to pin your back to the mat, it can get uncomfortable. It can get painful. It takes perseverance. And as we look at Jacob, that's one of the things that Jacob had in this wrestling match. As we read down through verse 25, when he saw that he had not prevailed against him, talking about the one he was wrestling, he touched the socket of his thigh, so the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he, meaning Jacob, said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. There's some perseverance here, isn't there? And he has a goal, and we see what that goal, we'll talk about that in just a minute. But we see that endurance and perseverance that takes place, even after pushing through pain. Now, Justin listed some of he says close to a professional bull rider. I won't say I rode bulls, I got on the back of 5 bulls, and I didn't total 8 seconds with all of them combined. So, so that shows you how close I was to the PBR or anything. And the last one I got on, he definitely won. We'll say that. I went away in an ambulance, and he went back to eat. So, but I've dislocated many joints in my body. It hurts. Never dislocated a hip. I pulled a hip muscle before, but never dislocated a hip. This is some serious pain. And we see the fortitude. We see the strength and the perseverance that Jacob has to push through. If you've been through an injury like that, this is taking some mental strength. This is taking some physical strength. This is taking some determination, which are all things that give us perseverance. In looking at our wrestling with faith, as we look at our faith, it takes some perseverance, doesn't it? Because here's the reality that we know. I know the kids that I teach at Mobile Christian, they always say, or they'll say I'm old. Because one time they asked me how old, they go, "Oh, you're older than my dad." And I'm like, "Thanks for reminding me." But I also have a daughter that's in school here, so it kind of makes sense. But One thing I've learned, and it didn't take me all the way to the age that I am now to learn this, is adversity is a part of life, isn't it? And when you hear people that talk about success, people that have been successful, and it doesn't matter what field it's in, anybody that's had any amount of success and they talk about it, almost always, and I would say always, but that may not be absolutely true, but almost always, they're going to mention, as a part of their success, they're going to mention adversity. Why? Because adversity happens. James tells us this, in our faith, it is no different. In our relationship with God, it is no different. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be challenges. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 3, very familiar passage to us. James says this, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, if," no, that's not what he says, is it? What does he say? "When you encounter various trials." And then he goes on and he says, how can we consider it joy? One, he says, don't be surprised. And Peter's going to say this a little bit later. Peter talks about, he says, "Beloved," chapter 4, verse 12, "do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing." What's both Peter and James saying? He's saying there's going to be difficulties in life. And he's talking to Christians, and he's acknowledging, and this is acknowledged throughout the scripture, is that probably even more so because you're a Christian, will you have difficulties? But it's not even that, because Peter, as you go down through that context, he talks about you're sharing in the sufferings of Christ, but he says make sure that you're suffering for righteousness. You're not suffering as a murderer. You're not suffering as an evildoer. You're not suffering. And what's the point here? Is there's suffering, there's difficulty, there's adversity in life no matter what. And it takes perseverance, doesn't it? And as we think about our faith, we should not be surprised if we're pursuing a relationship with Jesus. And this, people ask me this all the time. They say, "Jeremy, aren't you surprised at what you're hearing? Aren't you surprised at what people are doing in the world?" Stop right there. As soon as you mention world, does it surprise me that the world does worldly things? No. You know why? Because that's what they do. It doesn't surprise me that bad things happen to good people, because that's a reality that we see that God, Jesus promised to his disciples. He says as he's preparing to leave them, he says to them, don't be surprised if the world hates you. Why? They hated him. And if they hated him, it should not surprise us that they're going to hate the ones who follow him. And even though it shouldn't surprise us, it's going to take perseverance to push through, isn't it? It's going to take that determination. It's going to take that perseverance, that toughness, that pushing through that will allow us, even when something difficult may challenge our faith, you got to have perseverance to push through. Matthew 16, or no, we'll get there in a minute. I'm too far down my notes. You don't know that, but that's what happened right there. Point number 3. I got to keep track of time. You're one of those congregations like I've been to before. No clock in here. Do you know that? That is dangerous when you bring me to speak. No, that's dangerous. But we're halfway through the sermon, but we'll shorten the rest of it. Point number 3. First, we see the principle of responsibility. See the principle of perseverance. Another principle that we see here with Jacob wrestling with God is humility. We see humility. And this is, and we'll kind of bring this back together. I said I'm going to try to tie up all the jumbledness that you're probably thinking, man, this isn't making sense. But this is not necessarily something that he went into the match with. I think this was the point of the match. This was the point of this event that's taking place, and we'll come back to that later. But one of our greatest struggles when it comes to faith, one of our greatest struggles when it comes to pursuing righteousness, when it comes to following God, when it comes to aiming to live a life that's pleasing to Him. And this was true in wrestling, and we've said this about other sports. Man, I've said this. 2 of the first, how many weeks of NFL? 4 weeks. 2 of the first 4 weeks of watching the Denver Broncos, I said, their opponent didn't beat them. They beat themselves. Have you said that about your team before? Yeah. A lot of times, our biggest opponent is ourselves, isn't it? And one of the biggest struggles, the greatest struggles we have in faith is pride. Is pride and self-centeredness. And as we look at Jacob, I don't want to look at Jacob in that wrestling match. I want to look at him right before and look at his life before. He was pursuing, and we see this all the way from the beginning when he steals the birthright of Esau, when he's jockeying to get what he wants out of the marriage and those kind of things. As we see, what is he being motivated by? He's being motivated by his desires. He's being motivated by self. And there's a couple of things. One, he is aiming to get these things that he wants and he desires, and not necessarily trusting in the promises of God. Because before this point, God's already said something to Jacob. He says, I am going to bless you. Many nations, that same blessing that was given to Abraham, it was going to be carried through Jacob. But Jacob, this isn't what drove him. This isn't what motivated him. And we notice this from his prayer. Look at Genesis 32, starting in verse 9. As Jacob, he's kind of planning, how can I escape Esau? How can I get out of this? Because it's kind of coming to head. Esau wants to meet him. And look at what he says. He prays to God. And here's what the prayer should be. Here's what the prayer should look like. And he even mentioned some of the right things in here. The prayer should be, God, you promised me these great blessings. And I trust that no matter how afraid I am, that no matter how grim it looks, I trust you 100%. Prayer says some similar things, but a little different. Let's read it. It says, Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. I am unworthy of all the loving kindness. So he recognizes what God's done, doesn't he? I'm unworthy of all the loving kindness and of all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. And now, it's almost like he's pleading with him. God, do you remember what you said? Look at verse 12. For you said, I will surely prosper you and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered. Jacob's reminding God. Do you remember? You better remember, because I'm afraid right now. I'm worried for my life. So please remember what you promised me. And then this goes out, and so here I want to get to the last point, that humility that it takes here is Jacob was, up until this point, he was focused on what he had done. He was focused on himself and what he could achieve, because here he's kind of bringing God back into the equation. But why is he doing that? Because he's afraid. And that's what happens, isn't it, with pride? That's what happens when we get so involved with what I can accomplish and what I'm able to do. There comes a point, and it may be an opponent. It may be something that our ability is not capable of doing. That because when pride enters the equation, our number one goal has to be defending that pride. Played for the Seahawks 10 years ago, Sherman's last name. Richard Sherman. This has stuck with me because they were playing the Broncos in the Super Bowl, and it was true what he was saying. They destroyed the Broncos, if you remember that. Oh, man, it was ugly. Yeah. But anyways, I just remember one interview with him that just really didn't sit right with me because he said, I am the greatest at my position ever to play. And as I thought about that, and he was good, but when you make a statement like that, and I'm not saying anything on him, that's not what this is about. But when you make a statement, your whole emphasis and goal from that point forward is defending that. And the whole motive becomes, what can I do? What can I do? And if that comes into jeopardy, you know what comes in? Fear. Fear and desperation. And we see that with several people throughout the Bible. We see Elijah when he's afraid Jezebel's chasing him and he's about to die. Kind of the same thing is I don't know what to do. I might as well just die. We kind of see Jacob here. He's afraid. God, do something. Remember that you promised me? Do you think God remembers he promised him? And this brings me to the last point that I want to see tonight. The last point that will hopefully bring this all together is we see in Jacob wrestling with God is transformation. That's what this event was about. This event was about transformation because I look at this and let me make a preacher pun here. I wrestled with this as I was studying for that. I wrestled with this because we approach this text and we say, well, why did Jacob wrestle with God? Why did he prevail against God? Why did that happen? Why did he do this? And why? Because it kind of looks like Jacob won, right? He held on to him until he gave up and blessed him. That's the wrong question. Here's the question I want us to look at as we kind of fit this all together. Is not why did Jacob wrestle God? Why did God wrestle Jacob? Why is there this man that we come to find out is God, that he comes and wrestles Jacob? Why is God wrestling Jacob? And the answer that we see is because he wants to teach him something. And we see this throughout because, as I've already said, we see Jacob, he's motivated by the selfish things. He's motivated by the things that he's able to do in his scheming. And now it's getting to the point where he's not sure if he can keep doing it. And here's the thing, is God wants him to know, no, it's not you. It's me. It's me, and here's the transformation that takes place. Let's read down through that, verse 30. Not 30. What time is it? Okay, what time do we end? Okay, thank you. Keep telling me that, even when I'm getting done. All right, let's get back in 26. Then he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. He said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. Here's the question I have is, do you think Jacob knows this is God when he enters in this wrestling match? I don't think he does. I don't think he knows that this is God. I think there is a point, and I believe that point is when he changes his name. I think that's when he really, and probably when he touches the hip. He knows, I'm dealing with something a little bit bigger than man at this point. But as Jacob, so I start thinking, well, why did Jacob enter into this match? Because that's what Jacob did. Is he protected himself. He was trying to preserve himself. Because he knew, and I think he was trying to preserve himself because he knew that God blessed him. He knew that God promised him. He knew that these things, but he was mixing in his preservation with God's preservation of him. And I believe that as he comes to that realization, that's where the humility comes in. God, the man touches his hip. He's realizing, hey, there's something bigger here. But I think it's at the moment that this man blesses him and says, your name's going to be changed. You have striven with God. That Jacob realizes who it is that he's been holding on to. Who it is that he's been holding on to. And we know that he recognizes that because in verse 30, he says, Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. And when you look at Jacob's life prior to this event and after this event, there's a transformation that takes place. A transformation from a man who's striving for his own preservation, striving, doing the things, the scheming and the things that he did, now to fully relying upon God who promised him. And I think that's why God wrestled with him. And the reason I want to bring this up is because we look at that statement that I made earlier. Adversity is going to come in your life. Difficult things are going to come. And you know what happens when difficult things come? Your faith will be challenged. Because we have this battle too. We have this battle going on that sometimes we're our own worst enemy, aren't we? Is because we have this struggle. And it's kind of interesting about Jacob's name, because a lot of times when God changed somebody's name, the previous name was not mentioned again. Think about Paul and Saul. Now it's Paul, right? He's not Saul anymore. He's changed. He's a different person, has a different identity. With Jacob, we see throughout the rest of the text that he's called both Jacob and Israel. And he's called both of these different things. And some commentators, and I'm wondering this same thing, but some commentators say that that's because as you look at Jacob's life, there still was some of that struggle, wasn't there? He still made some mistakes. He still went back to some of those things. I mean, obviously, favoritism in his family was a big deal, and he kind of did that same thing later with his wife and his children. And so we see some of those struggles, and I think there was this constant reminder, and I think that's important about this transformation, is it was a continual transformation. God was trying to teach him something. That you need to change your reliance on yourself to full reliance on me. And in our life, there are some people in this room. I don't know you all personally. I know some of you somewhat personally. I know Justin more than most because we spent, when you're in a cabin together for a week at camp, he got to know me more because I talk a lot more than he does. I don't know you personally, but I know because there's a lot of people in here. There are some of you that are going through some challenges. There are some of you that are going through some struggles. There are some in here that maybe you're wrestling with your faith. And the challenge is causing you to say, can I take it? Can I continue to push on? Can I continue to persevere? Or maybe you're at the point where you're saying, hey, I need to just give up. Here's what I want to encourage you with tonight. The same thing that Jacob sees. The same thing I want you to see is that you can trust God's promises. See, because here's what it was about. Here's what this wrestling match was about. It wasn't about how strong Jacob is, because he recognizes, notice what he says, this is what I now call the place. He says, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. As I look at this wrestling match, we look at what God does is he touches Jacob's hip. And I've heard so many preachers say, well, Jacob was so strong, he was able to overpower God. Are you kidding me? How many of you parents taught your children sports when they were very young? I played my children. Now, I always wanted them to know I'm going to win no matter what. But I'm not going to play. I'm not going to wrestle at how much I weigh. Not going to say that either. But I'm not going to wrestle at how much I weigh. My son that weighs a lot less than me at full power. I would destroy him, and I'm proud of that. But I would destroy him, right? So what do I do when I'm in this? Because what's the purpose of me playing with him? What's the purpose of me wrestling? What's the purpose of it? It's to teach him something. So I'm going to give him what he can handle. Isn't that interesting? God gives us what we can handle. That's a verse, isn't it? God doesn't give us more than what we can handle. And I know that's a tough, if you're in a challenge right now, that's a tough verse to hear. And that's not my favorite verse to tell you if you're in. Here's what I want to tell you. You have to dig deep, persevere, and you have to come to know God in a way that you can trust every word that he says. And just like he promised Jacob, he said, that should have been enough, shouldn't it? That should have been enough for Jacob to say, God promised this, so that's what's going to motivate everything that I do. Man, see, God could have wiped out, and Jacob recognizes that. He recognized, I went face to face with God, and he preserved. See how it shifted? He didn't say, and I prevailed, because I'm so strong. He said, and he preserved my life. Because he knows. He could have destroyed me, but he wanted to teach me something. And as you wrestle with your faith, as you wrestle with questions like, does God exist? Is God faithful? Is God going to keep his promises? I hope that as God allows you to wrestle, as he allows you, and that's the thing. Why did God wrestle with Jacob? He wrestled with him to teach him something. And it's the same question, why does God allow bad things to happen to us? Why does God allow us to face trials? Because he's trying to teach us something. Because what do trials bring out? The testing of our faith, which produces endurance, perseverance. I want to encourage you tonight, you can fully trust what God says. And he has great promises for each and every one of you through the blood of his son, Jesus Christ. And it's only through the blood of his son, Jesus Christ, that you can have those promises. In 1 Peter, when he says, don't be surprised at these things that are happening, they were being killed because of their faith. He says, don't be surprised, but keep moving forward. And he's already told them in chapter 1, here's why you can keep moving forward, because you have a living hope that comes in Jesus Christ. The promise of an inheritance, that you can count on that promise. Why? Because God made that promise and he does not hold back on his promise. He fulfills his promises. You don't have to remind him. You just have to trust him. And because you trust him, you keep pushing forward. Tonight, the invitation is simple. If you're going through something and you need prayers of this congregation, I don't know you personally, but I love you. I love you because you're my brothers and sisters. And I love you if you haven't obeyed the gospel. And I love you so much to tell you, you need to obey the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because without that, there's no hope. There is no hope, but with Jesus Christ, you have that hope of everlasting life. Maybe you're going through something tough. You're wrestling. You have to have your own faith. You have to make that choice to follow him. But I want to encourage you to make that choice with your life. Maybe you need prayers. Maybe you need to obey the gospel tonight. Do we come? Come forward and I'll meet you, or one of your ministers or elders would love to pray with you.